All right, Anne, I'm going to hand it over to you. We are live on Facebook.
Great, thank you. Chris Kiley, Associate Director of Texans for the Arts. This is Anne Graham. I'm Anne, Executive Director of Texans for the Arts, and happy to be here for our weekly dose of updates around the legislative session and all things happening around the arts and culture sector. This is our weekly Wednesday Arts Advocacy Update. Before I turn it over to our lobbyist and government relations budget specialist, Shannon Gangurdy, I'm just going to give a quick plug, reiterating what we talked about last week, which is our upcoming biennial Arts Advocacy Summit. And this year it has gone virtual due to the complexities of the pandemic and access to the Capitol building. So we have it divided into 3 sessions. We hope you will participate. This is a chance for you to meet with your legislators and talk about the issues that are important and why funding of public resources for the arts is so important in the best of times and also in these challenging times. You can go to texansforthearts.com on our website, and on the homepage, there's registration information there. The dates to remember are January 26th, February 9th, and February 11th. It's all spelled out there. We really hope to have a great turnout and to have legislative visits in each one of our 181 offices, both House and Senate. So I'll follow up with a plug for that at the end, but please mark your calendars for Texans for the Arts Foundation's Arts Action Arts Advocacy Summit. And now I'm going to turn it over to Shannon, who's going to be reporting and giving us an insight to the start of the Texas legislative session that started just yesterday, and what's going on and what we can expect in the coming days and weeks. So Shannon, thanks and welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Anne. And as you said, we are officially in the middle of the 87th legislative session. It felt very far away, and then all of a sudden it was here. So we're back. I actually have the Texas Senate on my TV right now. So if I look over every once in a while, it's because we're trying to keep real-time tabs on what's going on. A little bit different this year. This is the first time for me since 2005 that I was not in the Capitol on the opening day. So as you can see, I'm still in my house. So it's a little bit different, but we are navigating through and trying to figure out the best way to advocate given all the circumstances. So as you said, it started yesterday. The most significant thing that happened yesterday was that the House elected a new speaker. They elected Dade Phelan from the Beaumont area to be the speaker with very little fanfare, no opposition, no real opposition, and he is now the Speaker of the House. Today and tomorrow in the Senate and in the House, they are debating the rules. They have to adopt the rules to govern the 87th legislative session. It's not usually a big to-do, but this session, there are 2 kind of big issues swirling. One is COVID. How will the legislature operate? How will hearings operate? How will you provide public testimony? Those questions will be debated tomorrow in the House and today in the Senate. And the other big issue, which we've talked about on these Facebook Lives in the past, is the what was once called the 2/3 rule in the Senate, now is called the 3/5 rule. There is a rule that the Senate has long held that said 2/3 of the members had to vote for a bill to be considered on the Senate floor. A few sessions ago, the Republicans no longer had a 2/3 majority, and they changed the rules to be 3/5. So the rule's currently 3/5 as it stands. The Republicans no longer have a 3/5 majority in the Senate, and so the debate will be, do they keep the 3/5 rule and need to convince some Democrats to come along, or do they change the rule to be a simple majority, to which they have a simple majority in the Senate? So that is literally real time. The Senate is about to go back in session to debate that rule. So if you're interested, you can tune in live. The other thing that was really important that happened this week actually happened on Monday before session began. The Comptroller Glenn Hager is required to come out with a budget revenue, biannual revenue estimate. It usually comes out the Monday before session. It was no different this year. And what the revenue estimate does is it tells the legislature, here's how much money you should expect from revenue and from other sources to be able to spend in the budget that you are about to go write. The one that comes out in January, there's some subsequent updates, but the one that comes out in January, it tells you, first of all, in the current biennium, how much money do you have left? So I told you how much money I thought you would have. Now I'm going to tell you how much you actually have, because a lot of time has gone by. And then this is our first look at the next biennium, which will start in September of this calendar year. And so the news was good-ish, or it was better, I think, than folks had expected. We were not, have been expecting a difficult budget session. I think it will still be not a great budget session, but it's not going to be an as bad budget session. I probably need some more technical words for not as bad, or not as bad as it could have been. But what basically Hager said was, let me give you some historical numbers first. When we left session, Comptroller Hager said, when you spend all of the money that you've appropriated, you'll have about $3 billion left in the bank. So you're going to have a surplus. Well, last July, because of COVID, because of oil prices, because of a host of other issues, he said, okay, you're not going to have a surplus of $3 billion. You're going to have a shortfall of $4.5 billion. And that's a pretty significant difference. And so as you can tell, we were walking into a session thinking, oh gosh, this is going to be really bad. Well, Monday, he said, okay, now I think you're going to have a $1 billion shortfall. You're still going to be short, but it's only going to be $1 billion. There are several caveats to that number that I want to talk about very quickly. The governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker directed agencies during the interim to come up with a 5% reduction to their spending. The $1 billion deficit does not include any savings from the 5% reductions. Additionally, the state received $6 billion for the coronavirus relief fund. And depending on how that money gets spent, that will reduce some of our general revenue need for the current biennium. So that, in addition to the 5%, will also help that $1 billion shortfall. Most likely it will turn into a surplus when you take into account the 5% and the CARES Act money. A couple of things on the reverse side that will add to the cost for the current biennium is the legislature will likely have a Medicaid shortfall. They will have to put more money into Medicaid in order to make sure that that entitlement is fully funded. So as you can see, this is not an exact science, but 1 billion shortfall is a lot better than 4.5 shortfall. And we will see what the CARES Act and the 5% reductions do in terms of giving us additional resources for the current biennium. Additionally, he came out with a projection for the fiscal year 22-23 budget cycle. Like I said, that begins in September of this calendar year. His projection was that the legislature would have $112.5 billion in general revenue related funds to spend. And to put that in context, the legislature appropriated $118-ish billion in the FY 2021 biennium. And so, if you look at it very quickly, you could say, okay, 118 minus 112, well, that's $6 billion difference. It is, but there are a lot of factors that are contributing to how much they don't actually need to appropriate the full 118 billion that they appropriated in the current budget because of two major factors. One, the federal government has increased what's called our FMAP. They have given us more money per Medicaid enrollee than we received before COVID started. And so that means we can put less state resources into Medicaid because of an increased FMAP. Also, Foundation School Program, the state doesn't have to put as much money into the Foundation School Program, mostly because of additional CARES Act funding that went into schools. So I'm going to go not in too far into the weeds, but just to say $112 billion to spend for 22-23 plus federal dollars that are continuing to come into the state. It puts us on a decent trajectory. I will also add that the comptroller projects the rainy day fund balance. So we have, it's called the Economic Stabilization Fund, but people call it the rainy day fund. It's basically money that we set aside mostly through severance tax, which is oil and gas taxes. And we have it there for a rainy day. We've spent some of the rainy day fund when we had Hurricane Harvey. We've spent it during other, recession type sessions. And so per the comptroller, at the end of the next biennium, if the legislature does not appropriate any of the rainy day fund, we'll have a balance of $11.6 billion. And so the legislature will be able to use some of the $11.6 billion if they so choose to help pay for, whatever it is they think needs to be funded above and beyond the $112 billion in general revenue. I'll also point out that there's been talk. It will be seen whether or not Congress passes any additional relief for states, but that's something we'll be closely watching. They passed the CARES Act. They passed another federal bill in December with additional resources. But the question is, will they pass something else once there is a Democrat president and Democrat Congress in place? A couple other things that Comptroller Hager mentioned when he was laying out the budget revenue estimate. He specifically mentioned that there are a few revenue sources that have endured the biggest reductions due to COVID. And one particular that really impacts the arts, and that's the hotel occupancy tax. It's seen a large reduction, as you can imagine, across the state. It impacts the state hotel occupancy tax, but it also is going to impact the locals' ability to use hotel occupancy tax to support the arts. And so that's something that we're watching. That's something that we will be advocating for back to the legislature to make sure they understand the impact of the reductions to the hotel occupancy tax. Another factor that Comptroller Hager mentioned was that Texas has lost 570,000 jobs since the beginning of COVID. It was actually much more significant, and then we've been able to gain some back, but the net loss has been 570,000. And he mentioned specifically that the biggest hits have been in the hospitality industry, hotels, vacation industry. So just something else, that is relevant for the arts community to watch out for. We will, likely see the House and the Senate file their base budget sometime next week. If history repeats itself, next week is about when you'll see both the House and the Senate versions come out. We will be closely following the Texas Commission on the Arts budget and what it looks like in both the introduced versions. And based on what the base bill looks like, it's a starting point, but based on that starting point, we will kind of calculate our ask for the legislature, and we will make sure that the arts community is fully aware of what's in the budget and what our corresponding ask becomes. Once the base budgets are released, it's usually about the next week that the Senate will start holding budget hearings, and they will do it usually in groups by articles. Texas Commission on the Art is in Article 1. It just depends on when they decide. Sometimes they take up health and education first. Sometimes they do it toward the end. So we'll be waiting to see when they post when the arts funding will be discussed. But as soon as they do, we'll put that out, and there will be opportunities for public testimony. And so we will want to work with our arts community to provide testimonies so that the legislature understands the impact of COVID to the arts and economic benefit and all the advocacy points that we want to make sure our Senate and House budget writers understand. So with that, Anne, I think I'm gonna turn it back over to you. I think I'm about 1 minute, maybe under my time. A lot going on. I wanna mention one more thing. I've mentioned this before, but the budget is the only thing the legislature is constitutionally required to do. So it will happen. They will pass a budget. And so that's where, we wanna focus our energy and our efforts in such a, I don't want to say unreliable, but a session that an unpredictable session. So with that, I'm gonna turn it back over to you, Anne.
Great. Thank you, Shannon, very much for that overview. And I have a couple quick questions for you too. What is the timing, do you think, on any kind of change of staffing of committees with a new Speaker of the House? Well, what is that passage of time? What are the mechanics of that? How long do we expect before we know who all the committee chairs are in the House? What kind of turnover do you think we will be experiencing?
Well, I will say that the House and the Senate have both indicated that once they get through the rules this week, they will adjourn until, I believe, January 26th. So there will be no session at all next week. And then they will all come back in the following week after that. It is a little more complicated in the House. So on the Senate side, Lieutenant Governor decides committees. We haven't had a ton of turnover on the Senate side. You've got the same Lieutenant Governor. You will likely see very small changes in terms of chairmanships over on the Senate side. So we kind of have a sense of what's going to happen on the Senate. On the House side, you have a new speaker, you have new members. It's just a very different conversation. And it's also more complicated because, and I'm not an expert on the House committee rules or how it all works, but typically each House member gets to turn in kind of a preference in terms of which committees they want to serve on. And there's 150 House members. So I understand it to be a very complicated process of placing people where they want, making sure you have geographical diversity, making sure you have party diversity, just all, you want to make sure that you're covering your bases for each committee. So that process takes a while. That being said, without looking at a calendar of how it's gone in the past, I would assume that House committees will be named probably, late January-ish. I will go back though, Anne, thank you for asking, and look to see how it's gone in the past, but it's just a longer process. You would expect to see the Senate committees come out much sooner, maybe, even next week, so.
Yeah, I think I remember from my calendar last session that the Senate hearings on Article 1 were the first week of February because they dovetailed when we had our Arts Advocacy Day. So I'm always thinking of it in terms of relationship to our Arts Action Summit and our Advocacy Day, because we want to be able to, be timely in our feedback. And the other thing about hearings that we don't know is with the pandemic, there's much stricter access. I thought that the Senate and the House were still sort of like trying to figure out how hearings will be. You can't all pack into a shoulder-to-shoulder hearing room. There may be social distancing. There may be restrictive access. We don't really know yet, right?
We don't. And there's a lot of people asking that question to the folks on the inside. The inside folks are saying, we don't know.
Yeah.
There is a tent set up on the north side of the Capitol for free rapid COVID test. Originally, it was voluntary. You were not required to take a COVID test before coming into the Capitol. Yesterday, for the opening day, they put out notice saying it is required for the opening day. So I haven't seen anything today, but nor have I been up there. But I know that it's at least, recommended. And then I believe various offices could require that you've gotten a negative COVID test. So, like I said, one day it was optional, then the next day it was required. And I think it's back to optional. So I think it's going to be a very fluid process. And I think it's going to be trial and error. We've never had session, as far as my recollection, during a global pandemic. And so they're just going to have to be, I think folks are going to have to be flexible. They want it to be open. They want it to be a fair process. They want the public to be able to testify, but you also have staff and members, that you've got to keep safe as well. So I think they're just trying to balance all of that. And I just don't think there's no perfect answer to this. So I'm glad I'm not deciding. I'll say that.
Well, I contacted my own representative in my own Texas Senate to find out what their protocols were for their offices. And it sounds like it's up to the discretion of the individual elected official within reason, following the larger guidelines that you've just mentioned, like mandatory testing and wearing a mask. But whether they'll have virtual meetings, whether they'll allow Zoom, how many people can be in their offices, the offices tend to be small. So they're going to be setting all their own protocols, which is something that we have to be very aware of. Of course, our Arts Advocacy Day and our Advocacy Summit is going to be virtual. I think the only other thing I was going to mention, just in terms of the budget as well, is that the CARES, that approximately $6 billion from the CARES money that was the original way back in March, April, when the first CARES budget came through. One of the things that was really important, but wasn't really focused on, was that when President Trump signed the bill in the end of December, the new CARES and the COVID relief, it gave the states a one-year extension, right? And you remember, those dollars had to be spent by December 30th, 2020. And at the 11th hour, and I think people were anticipating this, that was extended to December 30th or 31st, 2021. So there's another year there for our elected officials and our state leadership to figure out how they're going to spend that. So certainly the arts has been hard, and yeah, along with the hospitality, along with obviously restaurants and bars, and you name it, we've all been experiencing it, and we'll be again honing our remarks to be able to take those to legislators as to why it's so important to continue to fund the arts. I think that's it for my questions. The only other thing I was going to, couple things, just last minute plugs. because of the bill that was just signed at the end of the year in Congress, the CARES and the COVID relief package, there's a series of webinars that are coming up this next week. Well, this Friday, the 15th, as well as next Friday, the 22nd, hosted by Americans for the Arts, really teasing apart the PPP, the payroll protection program that has been infused with revenue for the new year, along with the unemployment issues, and then the Small Business Administration, who will be managing the Save Our Stages program and the $15 billion there. They're hosting a workshop on next Thursday, which is this Thursday, tomorrow. So you can go to TexansForTheArts.com, and you can also go to our Facebook page, which you're on right now, and you'll find links to those workshops and really encourage you to take advantage of that. And then Americans for the Arts also has every Friday, they have a session, sort of office hours. Nina Azulai-Cincelli runs office hours for you to literally go online and meet with somebody to talk about the issues that you're facing, trying to get PPP or PUA, all these acronyms that we have. So please go to our Facebook page and try to look that details up. And last but not least, please mark your calendars for our Advocacy Day, our Arts Action Summit. Shannon will be a panelist. We'll have a whole range of speakers talking about our issues, getting ready to meet with our legislators and to talk about why the arts are so important and critical to not only from a job perspective and a quality of life perspective, but really helping rebuild our communities as we work our way through this pandemic, begin to get vaccines, as I hope many people are soon. And we thank you. We're over. We rarely make it in 15 minutes. There's so much to report. Thank you all. And we hope to see you next Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And until then, stay safe, wear a mask, social distance, and keep going to our website and our Facebook and social media to keep up with the latest. So thank you.